Good evening, everyone. It's got a beat and you can dance to it. Welcome to Kicker Unmasked Live. We're going to call this one the home edition. Weather's got us kind of under the funk. A lot of people can't get to the studio. We got ice and snow and cold temperatures. I think it's actually colder here in Oklahoma than it is in some of the other parts of the U.S. But this is Kip coming to you live tonight. We've got a great show planned for you. We're just going to have an open forum tonight. Kind of open the mic up, ask questions, try to answer some more things, look at the feed. See what's going on. We got three special guests joining us tonight. We got Derek Williston from Williston Audio Labs. Everybody knows him. Our boy, High Five Vega, will be coming on board as well. Perhaps you've seen him. Reverse Polarity is a big show he's been doing recently, especially with Dean from down at 5 Star. He's doing a lot of stuff. He's kind of become the king of stream. At least that's what Derek likes to call him. And then our boy, Andy McGill. I don't know if there's a bigger Kicker fan out there than Andy McGill. He's done a lot of stuff on Facebook. He started the Kicker Club. He's got his own YouTube channel. He's been doing a lot of good things on that, a lot of testing. So with that said, I'm going to bring the boys in tonight. Let's add Mr. Derek Williston to the feed first. Big D, how are you doing this evening, sir?
What's going on, everybody? Good to be here, Kip. Thanks for having me. And sorry you guys are so cold and icy and all that stuff. It was 60 degrees here today.
Man, I got to tell you, this morning when my wife got out of bed, she got up a little bit before I did, but it was negative 16. And I don't mean with the wind chill. That was the actual temperature here in Stillwater this morning. So, yeah, it's cold here.
Yeah, get out your ice skates and just enjoy it while it's there.
Going to bring into the feed, besides Derek, like I said, we got our boy High Five Vega joining us tonight.
Yo, yo, yo. It's cold, guys. It's really cold right now.
It is really cold. What's the temperature? You know, what's the temperature in your neck of the woods?
I think it's like 9 degrees, something like that.
It's about the same temperature here right now. It actually got up to 12 or 13 today. So that was the high for the day here in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So
good times.
And I think actually the guy who should have the coldest temperatures of everyone because of his location probably was out sunbathing today. So let's roll him in, Mr. Andy McGill, the Kicker fan. How you doing tonight, Andy?
Pretty good. How you doing, guys?
Man, that's a good-looking hoodie.
I dig that. I dig that hoodie.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. I really like the color. Williston Audio Labs. Of course, Kayla had to grab one, too.
That is a very good-looking hoodie. I think I need to break out the credit card and go hit the merch store. Looks like I need one of those.
Super comfy.
Yeah, we can hook you up.
So everybody's tuned in. We didn't roll the pre-roll tonight. We apologize for that. I normally have a very good internet connection here at home, but unfortunately in about the last 30 minutes, it took a dive. And what I normally get is 1,000 up and 1,000 down. It's barely creeping up at about 80. So I had to pull the pre-roll. It was too stuttery. And you can tell I'm a little out of sync. Some of that's internet issues and some of that's actually the speed of the computer I have here at the house, but it's not too bad. I'll just be a little bit of that Godzilla effect going on. So with that said, I'm going to throw a question out there, kind of talk about this one first. And it was actually in the feed before the show started. Someone asked about bass boost. And, Kicker, we kind of we've obviously put that feature on our amps and we educate people how to use it. He was basically asking bass boost, yes or no, and what does he do with it? So I'm going to throw it out there first. Let's start with Derek. What's your opinion on bass boost?
Yeah, so I'm an old school guy, right, back from the 80s, and we used to actually purchase amps based on them having the bass boost function or not. So some of you guys may not remember way back when. What I would say about amps these days, though, is you can get an amplifier very powerful these days, and the bass boost, as long as it has a variable frequency and a variable level as well, can be really good. But if it just has a variable level without a frequency adjustment, then I would just turn it down because you'd have to have your tuning just right to be able to maximize your bass output. You know, if it's set at 45 hertz, your box is tuned low or whatever, you're going to get some funkiness in your output. So generally speaking, I would leave the bass boost turned down. However, I am a big fan of bass knob controls. And as Kip knows, some of these are actually bass boosts and some of them are actually just level controls. It depends on the amplifier. But I do enjoy having a remote bass level control because I don't listen to the same type of music. I listen to different types of music, and some of them need some bass, some of them need it turned down. So that's how I feel about it. You know, sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't.
That's the very good point on that. I'm from the old days as well. And, back then everyone was looking for the features. Amps at one point were just amps. They didn't even have crossovers, much less bass boost on them. So I do come from that day when, as you're going through year after year with product upgrades from the different companies, where the feature sets getting piled onto the amplifiers became one of those selling features that people look for. And bass boost is one of them. Obviously, bass boost is a gain control. It's just a gain control at a fixed frequency, or as you said, Derek, if it can be adjustable, you can actually find the frequency you want to adjust it at. So we usually tell people to go either turn the bass boost off, even though it's a feature on our amplifiers, or know what you're doing with it. The biggest problem that you run into is it is a gain control. And if you dial up 12 or 18 dB of boost at one specific frequency without turning the gain back down on the amplifier, you're going to just put yourself in a situation where you're just clipping. Gain is gain, whether it's at a fixed frequency or over a broader range. Gain, obviously the gain control on an amp is overall gain, all frequencies, whereas bass boost is a gain at a specific frequency that's either preset or, like you said, can be adjustable. Like if you get into our plus versions that were on the KXAs, you could actually adjust that center frequency, which for tuning is a great thing, because if you need to accentuate some really low end with just a little bit of bump, you can do that. But I have to caution everyone, just remember, if you add 6 dB of gain with a bass boost knob on your amplifier, you probably need to turn around and pull 6 dB of gain back out with your gain knob, or you're going to be driving yourself into a clipping situation. And I think that is where people get themselves into trouble. You think the same thing, Andy?
Yeah, I feel like bass boost is really only necessary if your system isn't put together properly, where you don't have enough power going to your subwoofer. Everything isn't matching as it should be. Bass boost really, it like you were saying, it's going to cause a clip signal before you normally would have it. So, I mean, I tell people, put your bass boost down to nothing, crossovers all the way up, and then set your gain, and then don't set it, forget it. Don't start going back there tweaking it up. Well, this song could sound a little better if I turn this bass boost up. I mean, if you listen to old school music where the bass really isn't there, that's where it comes into play, and then you have to watch, like you said. So that's my opinion on it.
V-pattern for the win. Sorry.
What about with you, Hi-Fi? I mean, you review amps as well. You do some power testing things. What's your opinion on bass boost?
I think there's not a problem with bass boost at all itself. The problem lies in the people. So if you set your bass boost up where you need it, and then you set your gain, you're going to be just fine. That's typically not how people do it. And bass boost only really became a problem when people started rebasing tracks. And that's when it became a real problem, because you got really, people like to poo-poo the bass boost, but then they'll clip the heck out of a track, or their track they're playing is clipped. You can put it in Audacity and see that it's clipped. So, sometimes you just got to realize your situation. And if you're running normal music, you can use bass boost. It's just fine.
Someone here, Shade Tree Living, had a question. I'm going to pop it up. It says, what about helping with bass roll-off on factory system? Well, the reality of that is, yes, it can help. But the thing you have to realize is, in a factory system, as you're turning the volume up, their DSP inside the factory radio, when you reach a certain volume level, it starts rolling the bass off. Now, that can either be with EQ or it can be with gain. Really depends on how they do it. And then when you turn your factory radio back down, then they roll that bass back in. So it's happening kind of dynamically. And what you would get into is, if you do 6 dB of bass boost to try to compensate for that roll off, it's going to be there all the time. So when you turn your radio back down, now you've got 6 dB more bass boost on top of the factory after it's put it back in as you've turned the volume down. There's a dynamic EQ, or a shout out to our guys over at Audio Control. They call theirs AccuBass. And the AccuBass, actually, it's a bass boost that actually happens at a certain volume level. So you actually find out where your factory system is actually kicking that bass off, and you set that point in the AccuBass. And so that bass kicks in when you reach that volume level. So it's a dynamic bass boost, an intelligent bass boost, more or less. But that's a good question. I wanted to put that up here and talk about
Kip,
that.
how does the key lock work with that? Does it compensate for that factory roll-off?
No, what you have to do on the key lock is you turn your radio up to where that bass roll-off is there and its effect. then you let the key lock do its thing and it'll EQ that back out. Then as you turn the volume down, it is going to be like a loudness control. You're going to have a little more bass as you turn the volume down than you do. It doesn't dynamically take it in and out. It just compensates for that roll off at the top. The difference between a bass boost and an amplifier and the key lock is the key lock, you actually turn your factory radio to the point that it's happening. The key lock analyzes what frequencies are being rolled off, and then it fills in what it needs to instead of it just being you guessing at what frequency you need to boost it at, if it's adjustable. Or if you have an amplifier where most of them, that EQ is fixed at 40 or 45 hertz, that's not necessarily where you need to do that boost to make up for the factory roll off. But the key lock will determine what it is. The only thing is when you turn the volume back down, yes, you're going to get that natural. It's going to be like a loudness effect that can happen. And in that case, what you do is just grab the bass knob on the radio and just turn it down some to try to compensate for that.
That was a good question. I was wondering how that worked dynamically when the volume went down.
Right. And that's the thing. That's the issue with bass roll off and boost. A dynamic EQ is really something that will take care of that in a better way. Here's my patented wink, stay tuned.
Yeah, you got to do it. I think people get a little confused when it comes to EQing. You try to not boost any frequency if you don't have to. But also, if you boost at 45 hertz, there's something to an EQ called a Q factor. So you're not just doing 45 hertz. You're kind of doing 45 hertz, and you're boosting a little bit to the sides of it.
Rob, that it's a lot of detailed explanation there, but all people have to remember is set the V pattern and you're good. That's what we all learned back in the day. The V pattern rocks.
Oh, yeah.
Bump up the bass, bump up the treble, let the mid-range kind of dip a little bit, and then you're smiling. It may not sound great, but you're smiling.
If you got horn-loaded drivers, the V pattern is not going to let you smile.
Yeah, maybe not with those.
No. If you've got compression-loaded drivers or horn drivers, that V pattern, you could shave. Just tilt your face to the driver, and you could just pull those hairs right out with that high frequency. Yeah. 25 hertz to life's got a good thing here, and it was kind of about the dancing around that same thing I said. How about saying the bass boost at any level and then the gain? And that's really, if you're going to use bass boost, if you want to use bass boost to accentuate some low-end frequencies, whether it's a fixed bass boost or adjustable, once you set the amount of boost you're going to have, understand you're going to have to go back and you're going to have to readjust the gain on your amplifier and go through the steps to make sure you're not clipping. Because if you have your gain set properly and you turn your radio up to the point where it's not clipping and your amp's not clipping and you're not clipping your output, but then you dial in 6 to 9 or even 12 dB of bass boost, I guarantee you're clipping. And so what you need to do is if you add bass boost, it's a guarantee you're going to have to go back and adjust the gain on your amp down to compensate for that. Just remember, gain is boosting all frequencies going into the amplifier, and bass boost is affecting just specific frequencies. But gain is still gain. If you take one particular frequency and you drive it 6, 9, or 12 dB hotter than everything else, you can still clip the amplifier way before you think you are. So that's the best way to do it, is do your bass boost first, adjust your gain, because your gain is going to need to be turned down to compensate for that bass boost. It's just a fact. And real quick, go ahead, Derek.
Well, I was just going to say, this is kind of related. How do you guys feel about setting the gains not being optimal in all situations? And listen to me and let me explain it a little bit before people start shooting at me. So
let me cut you off there. No, go ahead.
Depending on your source, some sources may just have a lower volume. So if you're setting a gain based on a frequency tone or however you're doing it, and setting it based on, hey, if I crank it all the way up to the radio's maximum output before it starts clipping, then I'm good. But what about those sources that are lower? So what about actually setting your gain so you don't have to turn your system all the way up and maybe just turn it halfway? And that way you do have a little bit of extra headroom, and use these things. You got two of them, two of these, use these to tell when you're starting to hear some clipping or starting to hear some odd things. That way it gives you a little bit more flexibility for your system. Because if you set it up, just gains set based on a test tone track, there may be times when you crank it all the way and you've still got some extra room there, because your source is just lower. What do you guys think about that?
I'll take that first. Something I didn't do at the beginning of the show. Yeah, I'll take that first. Everyone keep in mind, and Bill's got it scrolling at the bottom there. Bill Frog, he's up on his game. Remember, we are having a drawing tonight. You need to go hit that link before 8:30. So the contest is open until 8:30. We shut it down then. Bill will pull the winners, and we'll announce those live here on the show. So sometime between now and then, open up another window, go over there, hit that link, enter the contest. Derek, you and I have spoken a lot about some of these things, and you share a lot of the same thoughts that I do on this. So there's two ways I want to go on this. First off, I believe there's no such thing as too much power. There's only too much volume knob. So I, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, what I'll recommend to people is kind of based on how I feel they are as an educated user. But for myself, if I've got some speakers that are rated 100 watts RMS, I personally have no problem putting them on a 300 watt, 400 watt, 500 watt amp. I'll take a subwoofer. If it's rated 500 watts RMS, I'll put it on a 1,000 watt amplifier. I'll adjust the gains properly. And then I'll use, as you say, which unfortunately it comes with experience. And I'll admit my experience has come. I've blown up a lot of speakers in my day. And it's what taught me to know what to listen for and when to stop. Everything has a limit, and you have to be able to say, okay, that's enough, back it down, or you're going to damage it. But I am a firm believer in there's no such thing as too much power. And then, in the 80s, I'll even say, 83 to mid 90s, I was big into car. I had huge systems in my car, doing lots of big bass. It was fun. I enjoyed it. But what's changed you guys can look this up if you want to, but it's called actually the Volume Wars. And sometime in the 90s, the people who master and engineer music got into this battle where they continually drive the volume level up on the recordings, removing dynamic range, and just in a quest to make a track sound loud. And because they've done that, if you go, and I don't care where you get your music from, but if you go to listen to something that's from the 2000s, as far as its volume level, and then go back and find some classic rock or classic hip hop or rap or anything from the 80s back before they did this, there can be 9 dB, 12 dB of difference in the volume level of the music because of this Loudness Wars dynamic range compression game that's been going on in the engineering of music. And it's not a good thing. You take the dynamic range out of music, it causes listening fatigue very, very easily. I mean, there's lots of music that's been done the last 10, 20 years. I like the music. I can't listen to it for very long because I get listener's fatigue because of this Loudness Wars thing. So what's happened today, which is amplified because of this Loudness Wars, which you opened the box on that for me, Derek, is if I like to listen to a broad range of music, which I do, I listen to everything from 60s to current stuff myself. What I've found in that any system I set up, whether it's home or car, is I have to run the gain hotter than probably you would think you should. Because if I'm listening to music from the 60s, 70s, or 80s, if I don't have the gain turned up a little hot, I can't get to the full potential of the system. I can't get the full volume capability. But what that relies on is if you set up a system to do that, then the user, the person controlling the volume knob, they have to know what to listen for or look at if they're looking at clip indicators and know when to say when, because you might find that if you're running the gain a little hot and you have to turn your radio up, let's say your radio maxes out at 6 o'clock, you might find that you have to turn your radio up to 3, 4, 5 o'clock to get that older music to full output that you want. But now you play something new and modern, you might find you're going to be stopping about 12. You're not going to be able to turn that radio up as loud. The amplifier is still at full output. It's just because the source material is at such different levels, you have to be the throttle. You have to control when is when. And I think that goes right into what you're saying there, Derek.
That's kind of the thing. Whenever you set the gain, you can't just rely on that alone saying that, okay, I'm going to have a clean signal or I'm going to have this X amount of power because I set it with the multimeter and the RMS and how people do things. And you can't go, you really got to know where to stop. With great power comes great responsibility. I got a CXA 1800 on 112L7, 750 RMS. That thing's 1800 RMS at 1 and 2, and it's not even rated at 1. But I have to be careful. My amps run cool. My speakers run cool unless I, go a little too crazy. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I smell that. That's the beginning part. Let's crank that down. Let's turn this, because we don't need 65 hertz. That's what's starting to hurt the coil. But that's the best way to do it, because if you have an amp that's $500 RMS and you got a sub that's $1,000, you got your bass boost up, you got your gain all the way up, and it sounds muddy and no dynamic, clarity, no matter the box, the car.
Yeah, and I would say the Loudness Wars is definitely a thing, not just in regular music, but on YouTube. Being a creator, I notice people don't care if your audio quality sounds good. What they care about is if it's loud. So if I have my volume all the way to where I'm barely clipping into the red, they comment more that they like that versus when I'm about like -9 dB, which is typically where you want your voice in a real recording. And they like louder is better, not to everyone, but to the majority, I would say.
What's funny about that, you bring that up, Robert, is Ford Motor Company, and this goes back a little ways, Ford Motor Company, and I know about this was a study that we got some information on. They actually took and brought people into a facility, and they had them listen to systems at different volume levels. And what they did is they had one system set up, and it was playing well below 1% THD, but it was only playing up to 90 dB. And then they had another room they took you into, and that room was set up, and it was playing at 10% THD, but it was only playing up to a volume level of about 86 decibels. So the system that was higher distortion was actually at a lower SPL or volume level. But when people were asked to give their perceptions of which one was louder, most people picked the system running at 10% THD as louder, even though on a meter it wasn't. And it's kind of scary and spooky at the same time to think that that's how people's ears are trained. Trained by what they've listened to, what people have showed them is supposed to be good. Someone who's an expert telling them what to listen to. But I don't know about you, but I don't want to listen to a system at 10% THD anyway. But unfortunately, the masses have been convinced that when it starts sounding that bad, it must be loud.
Right.
Yeah, and people equate sound quality with loudness a lot of times. I notice when they're critically listening to an amp or something, you can literally have one of the cheapest amps, if it's a blind test, and have it just a little bit louder. And a lot of people will equate that with sounding better than the actual sound quality of the amp.
That brings forth the whole thing Kip mentioned earlier, was the Loudness Wars, and that's the reason they did that, is because that's the feedback they were getting, that people wanted to listen to it more. And honestly, it was actually more fatiguing. So it's one of those things where, like, we're on Facebook, we don't want to be on Facebook, but it's just brought us in. It's like just this thing that we can't get out of our hands, the phone. And so it's just one of those things that impact us, through our minds, that, they're controlling us.
Yeah. The Loudness Wars is one of the worst things to ever happen to sound quality. If you're going to invest all this money in speakers, and you're going to buy high-end speakers, and then you're going to buy high-end amplifiers, and you're going to buy all this expensive wire, and you're going to focus on the parts. What amazes me is how people spend so little energy to focus on the source material that they play into these really expensive systems, because it's only as good as the weakest link. And compression, MP3, Loudness Wars, all of this affects the final system that you hear. It's pretty crazy that we'll focus on amps and speakers and high-end components and high-end tweeters, but yet we'll play music off of YouTube and want to evaluate a system for sound quality, and that doesn't work.
Unfortunately, I'm that guy, because I'm the guy that always says convenience trumps fidelity in the long run, because either I cook it up from my phone on Bluetooth, or I can download a FLAC file and do all this nonsense, and I'm definitely not doing that. I'm doing the Bluetooth. But it's just important to be honest with who you are. If you can't, I know I'm not the, pinky up SQ guy. I want it to sound good, but I also want to pour a little gravy on it, as our good buddy JDR says. Every now and again, you got to have that gravy on there.
Nothing wrong with gravy.
Yeah.
Everybody likes gravy. I gotta say real quick that that Bill's comment that he responded to somebody was the best one. They're talking about your voice, Kip, being delayed. And,
Yes.
He says the voice is delayed, but the wisdom isn't. Good one, Bill.
Oh, nice.
Good one.
Oh man.
You know, here's another one here. I'm going to touch this one because this one's funny. John Charles, he says, speaking of ports, will a square woofer cancel itself out when using an arrow port? John, I don't know if you're being funny or if that's a serious question, but I'm going to take it as a serious question and answer it. So, square woofers, and I've read this on the internet and comment section for years, and talking to people in person. The first thing is a square subwoofer does not make square waves. Okay, if you look at how any speaker works, any speaker, doesn't matter name brand, doesn't matter shape or size, what you're doing is you are pressurizing and rarefying air. You are creating pulses of energy into the air. That's all you're doing. And a square subwoofer doesn't make square waves, and a round subwoofer doesn't make round waves. Both of them are simply transducers. And what a transducer does is it takes one form of energy, which in a speaker happens to be it takes electrical energy in from an amplifier and converts it into mechanical energy. Now, the best example I can show you of this is if you've ever gone out to a pond and thrown a rock into a pond, and the rock, you throw it out, it hits the pond, it goes bloop, and you see ripples emanating from that. If you look at them, it's round ripples. That's energy emanating from the impact of the object. Now, if I was to take a brick and throw a brick into a pond, and a brick is fairly rectangular, are the ripples that come off of that rectangular shaped ripples, or are they round ripples, perfectly concentric? You'll find they're round ripples, perfectly concentric. The shape of the diaphragm or the shape of the item that's causing the impact or causing the energy to be put into the air or the water doesn't affect the shape of the sound wave coming off of it. It's still a pressurized and rarefied system where that's what you're doing. The benefit to a square woofer over round is if you have two drivers side by side that have the same amount of travel. So if the round driver and the square driver both move the same distance, but if the round driver is 20% smaller than the square, which is what happens with a square subwoofer, you're going to put more energy into the air. So the shape does not have anything to do with sound quality or the wave that's coming off of it. It's simply that's the diaphragm that is pressurizing and rarefying the air. So whether you use a round speaker with a rectangular or a slot port, or whether you want to use a square speaker with a round port, it doesn't matter. You can design it either way you want. It's not going to affect how it sounds. And hopefully someday we can finally put an end to the fact that people think square waves come off of square speakers and they can't sound good, because that's just not true.
I've got a story. I've got a story with this.
Tell it.
I've told it before, and I know it's worth telling again because people might not have heard this. It was, what was it, 1999 or 2000 that the first L7 came out?
99?
Ooh, the first L7 would have been 2001, I think, if I've got my math right.
2001. And I was still early in my bass career at this point, and I seen the L7. I got the first L7 that come out, and I was going to build a box. And a kicker dealer told me this. They're no longer in business, but I go to build a box, and I'm like, okay, this is what I'm thinking. He's like, yo, you can't use a round port with this. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, man, it's a square sub. You need to have a slot port. Now, this might have been his sales tactic. And at this point, I'd never used a slot port, never heard of them, never seen one, besides Virtual Technologies had done some back then. And so in my mind, I'm still early in my bass career. I don't really understand exactly how everything works. And the logic just made perfect sense to me. I was like, yeah. So he gets me this design, and he hooks me up. He gets me a sweet box design. I built it. The thing's super loud, and it wasn't maybe even 5 or 6 years later before I started realizing, like, hey, that made no sense whatsoever. But he got me to use a slot ported box, so
makes sense if you don't think about it.
Yeah, right.
Somebody made a comment, Kip, about what if the pond is frozen?
Well,
Sorry.
it would look like the pond in my backyard right now. Now, it's not thick enough to walk on, so you're not going to see me on it. But if it's frozen, you're going to get this nice 10% THD crunchy sound. That's what you'll get if you throw the brick on that icy pond. I just saw this, and I want to throw it up there. DIY audio guy says, right, and the sound does not come out of the port. The port pumps back and forth and makes sound just like speaker cone will. The air has mass. He is 100% correct on that. And a lot of people think that the air in a ported cabinet leaves the cabinet and then comes back in. It really doesn't. And for those who want to do a little bit of research and got Google as your friend, the technical term is all these ports we put in speaker boxes, it's actually called a Helmholtz resonator. And what happens is that column of fixed air that's in the port, and it doesn't matter if it's round, rectangle, square, slot, take your pick, but that air has a volume and a mass. And when that speaker moves backwards and forwards, it's actually making that column of air resonate back and forth. And that extra mass of air is what's adding energy and output that when it's designed right, it comes back around. It tries to get back in phase. It might be a little behind. That's why a ported cabinet usually has a little bit more of a fuller sound or a little bit overhang on the bass, because you actually have that rear wave that tries to come back in phase, but it's actually delayed a little bit. But that's where you get that extra output. So absolutely correct, DIY guy. The air doesn't leave. It stays right there. It's just a vibrating mass to help add output when you do a ported cabinet. Shape doesn't matter.
Compression, levitation, hair tricks.
Yeah.
Hair ain't
Exactly.
flying up.
And that's why you
Exactly.
can use a passive radiator in place of a ported enclosure. For people that don't really understand how that works, that's how a passive radiator works. Because
So can you use a round passive radiator with a square subwoofer? Or does that create a opening into the planet?
It's a black hole or something.
Black hole 196.
Well, they don't fit well beside each other, so you probably want to use square. If you did, one square, do all square, right?
Well, we make round passive radiators. We use them in our TRTP downfiring boxes, and we actually offer that as an accessory. So if someone wanted to do passive radiators, and pardon me, Robert brings up a really good point. When you use a passive radiator, the big benefit is if you're dealing with a really small box and you're trying to get a low tuning, by the time you calculate what that port length and diameter would be, and so that the air velocity isn't just whooshing and adding noise, it's really too big. It doesn't fit in the box. It has to be outside of the box. And that's where passive radiators really come into play, is it allows you to achieve those tunings without using a port. You simply are using mass. You can change the weight or the mass of the drone or the passive radiator to get to the tuning you want. And that allows you to get those tunings like we do in the TRTP boxes. It's because we're using a passive radiator. Port, we just couldn't do it with a port. It's physically impossible.
Now, passive radiator setup, I'm sorry, Rob. Passive radiator setup, is that considered still a second order, like a sealed box, or a fourth order, or is it some kind of hybrid?
It mimics a ported enclosure.
Okay. So it's like
that brings up a very good point, Andy, and something we don't probably stress enough when we're on these shows, but I know everybody can't make every one of these shows, but there's a lot of really good information in some of the old episodes, the one that Kip and John did that talked about the different boxes and the different orders and everything. There was a lot of information out there that it even blew my mind, because I've been doing this for a while, and just, the things you hear on the internet and things you read and all that, I would just let everybody know it's a really good idea to go back and look at some of the old videos, because there's a lot of good content in there that talks about these specific things, like the questions you guys are asking. But we're trying to get Bill a little extra time so he can pull out some of those segments, because there's some really good meat in a lot of those videos. I know everybody can't watch every stream the whole time every week, but I would just urge you to go back and check them out when you can, or just listen to them through audio. And if you hear something, that sounds interesting, then you can switch to the video. That's my little plug for you, Kip. You're welcome.
No, that's a fantastic plug. And the more we open up those topics and talk about them, and then we get the questions that come back, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it really opens up the can of, we even need to touch on those topics maybe even a little bit further, or even go over them again, because people find that information valuable. The whole fourth order thing, it's kind of funny. And I wanted to bring it out into the light, because when we get phone calls, people talk about, single reflex bandpass boxes, and they call them fourth order. Our techs get confused because they're like, well, fourth order, you're talking about a ported box, right? Well, no, man, I'm talking about a bandpass. Okay, well, that's not a fourth order box. That's a symmetrical second order box. 12 on the top, 12 on the bottom, but that doesn't make it a fourth order box.
Common misconception. I hear it all the time.
It is, and what we're trying to do is, without stepping on people's toes, we're trying to let people know that that is not really what that's called. Here is really what it is technically, so we can all get on the same page. We do the same thing. I mean, it drives me crazy, but everyone calls a high pass filter on their subwoofer amplifier a subsonic filter, and even we do. We label it that because it's kind of become an industry name that people use. But the fact of the matter is, it's an infrasonic filter, not a subsonic filter. So if we're going to call it technically correct, it should be labeled infrasonic. But when you call it infrasonic, because people have been educated for so long that it's called a subsonic, they have no idea what it means. It's like, well, what's an infrasonic filter? Like, well, it's a high pass to help protect your woofer at ultra low frequencies. Oh, you mean a subsonic filter? No, but okay.
Yeah,
I'll license you at bump less dough. You can license that from me at low frequencies. Go ahead, Andy. Sorry.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah, I remember on the older Kenwoods, the 9104, 9106 for the subsonic, it would say the infrasonic for the 0 to 25 hertz. And now all the amps you see, subsonic.
Yeah, it's just like RMS ratings. It's just something. I think once it gets into terminology, though, like, you don't want to be the guy that's going around correcting people. So, like, every time someone says, "Oh, it's 500 watts RMS," you'd be like, that's 500 watts nominal, sir. That's not technically 500 watts RMS." or I adjusted the subsonic filter. What you mean, the infrasonic filter?
It's funny you say it like that, because that's another one that if any of you guys out there, if we ever get the chance to meet in person at a show, promise, take me to a bar, give me a beer or two, and we'll have fun all night long, because I got so many stories that they'll just pour out. But, RMS and Kicker is as guilty as everyone else. RMS is how you measure something. It stands for root mean squared. It's the mathematical formula to calculate power based on voltage. So even if you're talking about 10% THD or clipping or anything else, all of those are measured the same way. They're all done RMS. But unfortunately, as an industry, we've all gravitated to RMS apparently means nominal power or clean power coming out of an amplifier, when all RMS is a way to measure it. It doesn't by default mean that that's the clean power rating, but that's a term that our industry has kind of adopted over the years, that RMS means clean continuous power. It's another one of those that you're just talking about right there. You can either just go along with the trend, or you can try to explain it. And sometimes the reality is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, because you don't want to be the guy saying, when someone says literally, you'd be like, well, the true meaning of that was talking about a work of in a book or writing or something, so yeah.
It's like answering a question of what's the best enclosure? Well, we could go through a lot of things, but you know what? Let's just try this. I think you'll like this,
The best enclosure is the one that satisfies the needs of that particular install. There is no perfect enclosure.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and these shows that people don't, if you haven't watched all the Kicker shows, there's a lot of stuff going on. It is somewhat of a Kicker type of training. They cover a lot of the stuff that normal people don't think about. So there is a lot of knowledge there. And me, I'm just like the dummy that's put speaker in box, make go boom. That's how I do it. And then we just go from there.
Well, there's nothing wrong with put speaker in box, make it go boom. That does lead to fun. Liz Johnson, and this is a good one we can all talk about. I think this is a good one. It says, can the Kiss Lock 1 or 2 be used as a line driver from RCA on head unit? Well, not from the RCA on the head unit, but you bring up a very interesting question. A lot of head units today do not have what we would call a true preamp in them anymore. They're actually taking the speaker out. It's just the speaker signal. They're actually putting some loading resistors on the back heatsink of the radio so they can drop the signal down to actually create an RCA output. So the days of when you say it's got preamp outs, meaning it's coming off of a true preamp, are not necessarily true anymore. The reality is, in today's world, most head units, up until clipping, the speaker outs or the RC outs, they're both 20 to 20. They have full bandwidth. They have everything you need. The thing that kind of drives us a little crazy at Kicker, and it kind of goes into the design of our amplifiers, is we call it FIT or FIT 2 or FIT Plus. There's different variations of it. The most current iteration will accept up to 40 volts, which means 400 watts So that's a lot of power. But our RCA inputs on our amplifiers are a differential input. You can literally take speaker wire and run it straight into a kicker amplifier on an RCA pigtail and feed it right into the amp. You don't need to use an adjustable line output converter. You don't need to use anything. It'll go right into the amp. Now, the benefit to using a high voltage from the front of the car to where your amplifier is located, whether it's under the seat or in the back, is that you're trying to mask or overcome any noise that could be induced into your cabling in the car. And trust me, cars today, they've always have been, and they're not getting any better. They are noisy environments. There's all sorts of power supply noise, EMI, RFI, and that noise can get induced onto whatever cable is carrying your signal to the amplifier. So let's pretend that you've got 3/4 of a volt of noise that gets induced onto your RCA cable, and you only have a 2-volt signal running from your head unit back to your amplifier. Well, almost 50% of what's going to your amplifier, almost 50%, is noise, because there's only a 1.25 volts above that 3/4 volt that's actually clean signal. So unless you're playing the system really loud so that it's masking that noise, as you turn the volume down, you may hear noise, engine noise, alternator whine, whatever it may be. So eliminating noise from your radio to your amplifiers is always a good thing. Twisted pair cabling, always recommended. We highly recommend using that because that helps minimize or eliminate it. But the other thing is, you do want to run as strong a signal from your radio to your amplifiers up to what your amplifiers will accept. Now, if your amplifier will only accept 2 volts, running 10 volts into it's not going to do you a lick of good. But if you do have an amplifier that will accept a high input voltage, for example, on a kicker amplifier, it's 10 volts. 10 volts on the low side. Our newer amplifiers with newer technology take up to 40 volts. We want you to run as much signal as you can back there. It's going to help mask all that noise that's in your car. It's going to sound better at low volume. It's going to sound better at high volume. It's going to have more drive, and it's going to sound cleaner. It really will. Now, your question about the KISS lock, here's what I would say. If you've got a radio and you're using the RCA outs and they're 2-volt or 4-volt RCA max, and I know Derek had some interesting things on this that he's talked about, because you don't get that 4 volts till your radio is turned all the way up. I mean, it's not like you're getting 4 volts at half volume. You're going to only see that 4 volts when you're maxing that radio out. So if you've got that type of setup and you've got an amplifier that does not have differential inputs, and that's kind of the caveat here, because if you've got an amplifier that uses differential inputs, I'm going to tell you to take the speaker leads, go straight to the amplifier and go in. Don't even use a line output converter. But if the amplifier you're using does not have differential inputs like we use and some others do, then yes, adding a KISS Lock 1 or KISS Lock 2 to the speaker outs of your radio will allow you to get up to an 8-volt signal out of that to go back and drive your amplifier. So let's look at that. Up to clipping, whether it's the speaker leads or the RCA, it's a clean signal. It's full bandwidth. There's no problem with it. Would you be better off running out the RCAs that have gone through some knockdown resistors to a 2-volt signal to your amp? Or would you be better off coming out the speaker leads and getting an 8-volt or a 10-volt signal and driving that back to your amp? And I know, because I'm old school. I mean, there was a time when it was drilled into my head, RCAs, RCAs, RCAs. You don't use anything but RCAs if you want sound quality. And that used to be the truth. Amplifiers that had high-level inputs on them were nothing more than you go in on some speaker leads and it had some knockdown circuitry and it affected the signal and it wasn't good for sound quality. That used to be the way it was. It's not that way today with amplifiers that will take direct high-level inputs on differential input technology like we use, and others use it as well. So yeah, quit being afraid of the speaker wires, because actually it's a line driver and you didn't have to pay for it. And a lot of people, will buy a line driver and put it on their RCAs just to get more signal. Just use the speaker leads. Put a good line output converter if you have to. If you have an amp with differential inputs, just take those wires straight into the RCA inputs. So
me and Derek been arguing for DIN plugs for years now. So I would just like to promote the DIN plugs once again. But like you're saying about the head units, and I've been testing them recently, and the ramping of the voltage is just, it's pretty crazy. I've got a unit, a very cheap unit that'll come out Monday in video that I tested. And it's the same way. All new. They're within the last 10% of volume is where you're getting all your voltage. You may go, if it's rated 4 volts, you may get 2 volts at, 3/4 of the way. And then that last 10% is when all ramps up to the full 4 volts.
And then is it clean?
Yeah, it's clean, but you got to have it all the way on some. Well, It's not always clean on all of them, but if it's a quality unit, it's clean, but it still ramps right at the very end.
But I paid $20 for it. It's got to be quality.
Yeah, for sure. That dual you tested?
Yeah. Flying colors.
Yeah, with car audio, we it's a more difficult environment than your home audio, your pro audio, right? Because they have standards for the most part. Obviously, home audio kind of does RCAs and XLRs depending on how high end you get, but pro audio is XLRs only, right? I mean, who uses RCAs in pro audio? And then you have car audio where you have speaker level, and then you have RCA. And we used to, back in the day, have many XLRs and some other type of balance connections that go from the source to the amplifier, but that kind of went away. So it's a challenging environment, and that's why, having the right processor or integration point to use your factory head unit, because it's not the day where you go in and pull out your, den size radio and put in a new one and run your RCAs. We're stuck with these 8-inch, 10-inch, whatever screens because they control everything. So times have changed, as far as that goes, but it's good to see companies that are keeping up with it. And that's why I enjoy watching these shows too, because I'm still in the old school mentality with the old system. So seeing how you guys, Kip at KICKER, are able to integrate, these new vehicles. And I say new, these things have been around for like 8 or 10 years, right? that tells you how my newest car is a 2008. So yeah, I'm still stuck in the old school days.
Here's another good question. It's kind of tying into everything we're talking about here. Luis says, if I'm using the KICKER Kissel, would I need to turn on the radio detect button on my KX amplifier? Well, Luis, I guess the best thing to do would be really explain what the radio detect button is, and then we can go from there. Is the radio detect button on the original amplifiers that had called FIT, those came with let me get my facts right here. I think it was either 120 or 60 ohm. I could have it wrong. I apologize if I got it, but it's either 120 or 60 ohm resistor. And it was a loading resistor. And the reason that resistor was in there is because a lot of factory radios are starting to put Class D amplifiers in their chassis. And those Class D amplifiers, the load that hangs on the output is actually part of the operational circuit of a Class D amplifier. The speaker load is actually part of the load that the amplifier takes into account to operate. I know it seems strange, but that's the way it is. And in some Class D designs, if the load is not present, the amplifier can go into runaway high frequency oscillation, which is not only bad for a speaker if it was connected, but it also is bad for the amplifier itself and can cause it to burn up. So what factories have started doing is when you first turn on your car and it powers up with a factory radio, it actually tests the outputs of the radio to make sure that there's a functional working speaker load attached to it before it allows audio to pass, because they don't want the radio to blow up if there's a bad speaker or a disconnected speaker. So what would happen, and we're just like everyone else, the car manufacturers, they make a move, we figure out what it is, and we got to come up with a solution to make a workaround or make it work. So in the original protection circuits that are put in these radios, we put in this loading resistor into the FIT. And if you hooked up to a radio that had that protection circuit, you hook up an amp, the radio would come on, the amp would come on, but you wouldn't hear anything. You had to have loading resistors. So pushing that radio detect button on activates that loading circuit. So if the radio needs to see that load to turn on and pass signal, it gives it that. Well, things have moved forward, and if you follow our stuff, there's FIT, and then there's FIT 2, and then there's FIT Plus. And in FIT 2, we went to a 30 ohm resistor. That's because the radios and the factory systems, they changed the load that they were looking for as far as protecting it. So we had to actually change the resistor because the original FIT wouldn't work with the new factory radios. They changed how it worked, so we had to change the resistor. And then in this, we call it the third generation is what we're in right now. We quit putting the loading resistors into the amplifier because it actually requires much bigger sandstone resistors. The required impedance that these the radio amplifiers want to see is much lower now, the impedance. And that's why we now do it as a little external box. It actually looks like a little power sports amplifier. They're not very big. It's called a KISS load. And we do those in a 2-channel and a 4-channel. And if you have a radio today, a factory radio that requires loading to pass a signal, it's very common in Chryslers, and it's becoming more common across the board. We've had to move those loading resistors out of the amplifier and actually move them into an external box. It was kind of a cost decision and it was kind of a real estate decision, is when you start adding these big resistors, it actually would increase the size of the physical amplifier, and that's not a direction we want to go. And not everyone needs the loading resistors. I mean, if you're doing something that it doesn't require them, then there's no need to have the cost or the size added to every single amplifier. So now that's why we've taken them to an external box. But that radio detect switch, that is just in the FIT and the FIT 2. That's how you turn on or activate those loading resistors so that you can fool the factory radios that have that protection circuit into knowing it's there. And if it's a current generation today, FIT and FIT 2 wouldn't work, and that's why we do the external KISS loads, because you need that bigger resistor. And those do get hot enough. If you Google it, you can find people who just hang those big sandstone resistors off the back of their factory radio. They get hot enough to melt the tape. They get hot enough to start, making heat shrink look gooey. And that's why we put them into a little heat sink so you can mount them in a safe place, because they do get hot. So that's a lot of information, but if you ask about the radio detect, that's really what it is, what it started, and where we're at today as far as why it existed.
Man, aren't you guys glad Kicker's thinking about all this stuff? So when you have this problem, they just say, hey, use this. And then you don't even got to know everything that they've done to come to that conclusion. You're like, oh, just use the KISS load or the Kissel or the key lock or whatever. That's the part I love. So I like learning about this stuff, but I also like when it's crunch time, just use this. You don't need to know why it works. It just works.
You say that, Robert. What's funny about it, people ask us all the time, well, when do I need to use a KISS load? Because that's the new loading box that we have to get around the current. And the KISS load will work with anything. You can use it with current gen, old gen. It'll work with all of them. And our answer is, if you hook an amp up and you have no signal, you need a KISS load, because we don't know every single factory radio until we come across it that has that issue.
Yeah, I need to find out about that with my Honda Pilot. Going to throw a little sub in the back and a little amplifier. It's got the mids and highs, 10-speaker system, but the bass, with the all.
Oh, I thought we weren't doing that, Andy. I clearly seen a post where it said that wasn't happening.
Just a factory replacement,
This is how it starts.
Exactly. That's how it all starts.
Here's another good question I think that's good for discussion for us. It's from WTFN Garage. Kicker, are you ever going to make your own head unit? Love the show. Well, I'm going to answer that question with, I can actually remember the day when I said we'd never make a head unit, and I have been with the company long enough that I've been able to eat those words, and it goes great with a cold beer. There was a time we said we would never make any head units, and what we got into is, power sports, marine. We obviously make source units for those type of vehicles now. And I know your question is probably more geared towards automotive. I'll give you, I've been with Kicker for 25 years, and I can remember back this is probably 22, 23 years ago, that I was invited to go on a little tour meeting thing with some of the people who make factory radios for all the car manufacturers. And we kind of got to look into the crystal ball as far as what's coming. And this is, like I said, this would be 22, 23 years ago. And it's coming to fruition today. And Derek kind of touched on a little bit. There's really three styles of cars out on the market today, or truck, or whatever you want to call it. There are vehicles that you can buy a reasonable price dash kit and you can put your own aftermarket radio in if you want to. There are cars out there that, with a lot of work or expensive kits or modification from an installer or yourself, you can get a radio to go in that car. And then there are cars on the road where you're not taking that factory radio out. It is a permanent part of that vehicle. It is tied into the electrical and the data bus system so extensively that removing that radio can actually cause the car to not start or run. And I can tell you which one they're going towards and which one they're going away from. And where they're going towards is the fully integrated head units that don't come out, and they're going away from the ability for you to put your own head unit in. Don't hate the messenger for the message. It's just that, 22 years later, I've seen come to fruition what they told us was going to happen 22, 23 years ago. So will Kicker ever get into making a conventional car head unit, as you know it, whether it's a DIN or a double DIN unit, or like the halo or the floating screen pieces that you see? Probably not, because we talked about it then with the handwriting on the wall. It wasn't really a category that made sense for us to invest the tooling and the vertical integration of making those, because the market is shrinking there. Where the market is growing and where it makes sense is we need to figure out how to interface into these factory radios and get a signal. We do our own things, with the loads and the key lock and the key products and the fit interfaces that we do so that you can interface an amp into your car and then add whatever speakers you want. And of course, there's lots of other great pieces out there like the Amp Pros, and there's all sorts of other DSP interface devices that will let you, get a full range usable signal out of your factory radio. And at the end of the day, if you got an 8-inch touchscreen, you got steering wheel controls, Bluetooth, USB. Everyone here is getting a new cell phone at least every 2 years, which means you're upgrading your computer. So your navigation and everything else, you just plug it in. Your screen in your car is simply an interface to your computer that you're upgrading every 2 years. We just don't see the wisdom in getting in that market. So, I don't think I'll actually live long enough to eat these words, but as far as making what we would call a car head unit, unless you want to take one of our marine units, which a lot of guys who do resto cars do that, they'll use our marine source units and put them in resto cars, and they'll work great because it's 12 volts. I don't see us getting into the DIN or double DIN or floating screen units. I just don't see it happening.
I have $1 million idea for you, though. Why not have a KICKER interface app for factory radios, for all the factory radios?
I'm processing what you're saying, and what I'm thinking of would be like a black box that would go post factory radio that you could then use your phone as the control source.
Yeah. Oh, you got to get in on that Ford Sync, man. They click the app, boom, you're in the KICKER interface.
You're in the interface.
Yeah.
That's good. Real quick, just so everybody knows, we're down to like the last 5 minutes. If you haven't entered the contest yet, be sure you grab that link at the bottom. It's kicker.fun/AMA. Go enter that. 8:30, we shut that down, and Bill will draw the winners, and we'll announce them before 9 o'clock. We got some great prizes we're giving away tonight. So if you haven't entered the contest, be sure you go hit that right now. You got anything? You've been probably watching the feed, Derek. You see anything? Looks like a good question.
Yeah, it looks like people are having fun, and we're getting a lot of positive comments about, obviously KICKER doing this show every week. I think a lot of people look forward to the Tuesday night show here. I'll leave this one up to you. I did see this one come in, Kip, about the keys or the DIY tune, so I'll pass that one to you.
Here comes the wink.
Here comes the wink. The first thing I'll say is, and there was another question that ties into that. People have asked, are we going to have a standalone DSP coming? This is what I'll say. If you followed us from the beginning, you've seen where we started with key and what we keep adding to the key line. A standalone DSP or maybe a standalone version of key or something that's a little bit of both would probably be something I'd put my money on seeing coming down the pike if I was to be a betting man. The thing for us that we've had to challenge ourselves with is DSPs are fantastic tools to tune and tweak a car with. But the reality that we faced, and we had this discussion internally before we came out with even the original DSP that's in the IQ amplifiers, which I know a lot of you here have experience with, is once you get that product installed in the car, you have to have the tones and the signals and the measurement equipment to actually tune that car out. And it takes time to tune that car out. And in a production environment, it's a shop that's installing the gear. It's one rate, to install the gear, get it set up and get it functional. But then that shop's got to find a way to, I use the word convince, but I don't mean it in a bad light, but let you know and convince you that they're going to need to charge you for 1, 2, or 3 hours of labor time just for their guys to tune the DSP out, because the DSP does nothing until you have someone who's experienced actually put the tune on it. And that's the real, crux of the situation, is that I'm not saying there aren't installers out there who are not educated. There are, and they're very good at using a DSP. But even those guys have to talk the consumer, the guy who they're putting the install in for, go, hey, we're going to install it, but then I got to charge you for a couple hours labor because it's going to take me that long to tune it out. And so that's really what started the key for us. And the key product is, and I've had guys who know what they're doing and they're fully capable of sitting down in a car with the right tools and an RTA and their ears, which at the end of the day are some of the best things you can use to help you decide what to do, who are great at doing that. And they've heard what a key can do. And at the end of the day, they'll say, I think that key is getting me probably 95% of the way there. I'm not saying I couldn't tune this car better, But if I sat down and put the time in, I might make it 5% better. And you got within 95% of what I would do with just a 5 to 8 minute setup routine. And that's where we see the real power of what a DSP is doing, is when we can make it auto tune itself and give the average person great sounding audio, much better than they had. And it's a real simple automated 5 to 8 minute process that an installer can do for the customer, or the customer can do for themselves if they're a DIY kind of person. So I won't say we're not ever going to pursue a standalone DSP, but I can tell you the success we've had with Key, I think it would be key that you would then be able to go back and tune or tweak on to get that last 5% if you're that customer. I think that's really, in a nutshell, where you would see Kicker going. Now, I can't talk about some products yet because they're so far out that I'm not allowed to, but just a patented wink. Look at what we're doing with Key and read between the lines here. And I think you'll see some things coming in the future that will definitely be what you'd like to see for that DSP.
So Kip, Rob and I have talked about this before on 12 Volt Talk, but I'm curious about your input. So it would be a great benefit not only to Kicker, but to a lot of other car audio manufacturers to have a simple way to integrate to these new fancy, head units that are in the new cars. Do you guys actively go out to the manufacturers like Ford and Honda and Chrysler and all of them and try to lobby them to have a special output so it's easier for connecting external components? Is that something that it's just kind of we're wishing that may be happening in the background? Or is it the fact that these guys make so much money on the factory upgrades that they don't want to talk to this guy? Because, I know you do some things with some companies because you have the speakers, for the GMC pickups and the tailgates, things like that. But for the other stuff, is that something that, these car manufacturers work with you guys, or is that just hands off? How's that work?
That's a good question. And that could be a whole 90-minute discussion show just by itself. But to kind of do it in a short case here, we are blessed that we work with OE manufacturers. You've even said in some of your shows talking about the speakers. When you came into the visit, you saw some of the OE speakers that we manufacture for some of these people. They come to a company like us when they're looking to have, they do their base audio system and then they might do their premium audio system. And when they come to someone like us, they're looking for what they call better than premium. And so it's that step between, I really don't want to build or buy a box that takes up a lot of room in my car, and I don't want to add amplifiers, and I don't want to deal with adding more batteries, or do I have to worry about my alternator? It's not that customer, but it's the customer who wants something just a little more than premium that works within the electrical system the vehicle has. And that's what we design and manufacture. I've probably used the term before, we call it the 4.1, but we have a OE amplifier called the 4.1. And that amplifier can be flashed with personalities designed for specific vehicles. So even though it may be a GM, or it may be a Ford, or it may be a Subaru, or whatever it might be, we can actually program that amplifier so that once it's in the car and it plugs into the car, the bus on the car talks to that amplifier and says, hey, I'm a Ford F-150, whatever. And that amplifier will just automatically select the tuning that we've designed for that amplifier on the fly for that particular vehicle. So we do get to work with the OEs on that level. But what I can say, you talk about, talking them into having an output. I think all of us would just be utterly tickled if every factory radio just had RCA pre-outs with full range signal and you could just plug in whatever you want. I don't think that's ever going to happen. When we ask those type of questions, we get the look and we get the laugh, because their focus is putting in a system that hits a price point and a target and a 36-month, 36,000 mile warranty, and it doesn't break. That's their goals on the OE side of designing something. Probably the most interesting story I could share, and I'd have to think back and remember, I want to say it was 18, 19, and 20, but I could be wrong. There was a point, like with a Ford F-150, they actually had that vehicle pre-wired to take a Kicker VSS, which is the vehicle-specific subsystems, that literally, if you'd go into a Ford for those model years, you go to the back, pull the carpet up, there was actually a harness, and all you did was you could buy it aftermarket, the Kicker VSS, and it literally just plugged in and worked. And they installed that harness at the factory during assembly. But that's not the norm. We had to fight pretty hard to get that to happen just for that. So what really usually happens is we get a little bit of inside information because we work with them on developing OE products. But a lot of the times we find out some of these interface things after the fact because they're not necessarily open and forthright telling us what's coming. They like their closed loop systems and they want to keep people out of them.
Yeah, it just seems to me, that this is not like a kicker war. This is every aftermarket car audio manufacturer would have something to gain from this. So it almost seems like a lobbying thing, that you guys would all come together and say, look, you help us out, we'll help you. This is a two-way street here. That's the part I can't
He's
wrap my
talking
mind
about
around.
collusion.
I know it's much more difficult than I'm making it sound here, but obviously, I don't know. So all you other manufacturers who are watching this show, because I know y'all watch it, contact Kip and get, y'all work on this because we need it. We need it as an industry. We need it as the DIY guys, and the shops would want it too, and you're welcome.
I can imagine the conversation going. It's just like me. I walk into my boss's office, sit in a chair, kick my feet up on his desk, and I'm like, hey, boss, I think you ought to pay me like $5 more an hour, and then I should do less work. And I imagine that look is the same look that Kip gets when he goes in there and wants things done from the General Motors or Ford or Subaru or whoever.
They just want to make $5,000 on the premium audio system.
Yeah.
That's it. And again, obviously people like Kicker and some of the other manufacturers can benefit from that as well by being a partner and integrating, so you can get that. But I'm referring more to the every person DIY, because it's just too difficult to have an aftermarket system for each car. There's just too many of them to have, hey, I'm going to go buy a XYZ component. JL tries to do it with their stealth boxes. But how many cars can they do? They can only do a certain number of cars, right? So it's all, trying to figure out a way to make this work. So I'll let you guys ask some questions because I'm talking too much.
Brandon Wallace, he just, auto-tune, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. There's, a DSP is a great tool, and if you know how to use it, you can tune it to how you want it. But something, and since you brought up earlier in the show, which was the key lock, there are some things in a factory radio that you would be hard-pressed to figure out and correct yourself without a computer doing it for you, without it running some test tones and figuring it out. And some things that the key lock does is, besides rolling, re-EQing that bottom end so you do get some bass when the factory radio rolls it off, besides all the equalization that could be in the signal from the factory radio for them to tune and tweak for their speakers, the key lock will automatically give you a flat 20 to 20 line out of that radio, so you get rid of all that factory EQ. It will also analyze, and if there's time alignment, it'll remove it. And if there's all-pass filtering, it will remove those. It will remove up to 3 of those automatically. And those last 2, the time alignment removal and the all-pass filter removal, those are things that you're not going to do if you're hand tuning a DSP. That's something that needs to be done auto-magically, as I like to call it. And that's something that the key does, that there's really no other processor on the market that will do that type of correction and fix for you. And it does it automatically. Now, the more things the key has to correct, and this was kind of on, we did an episode where we actually did live. We put a key on, showed it on an RTA and showed what it does. The more things the key has to correct, the longer it's going to take. So if it's just doing equalization, it does that in about 5 minutes. If it's got to start removing time alignment or all pass filtering, that's going to take it closer to 8 to 10 minutes. But it does those things automatically so that you can get a flat signal that's usable, that you can now dump into another DSP. So now you can do your tuning and tweaking for your environment or your speakers or your personal taste. But the cool part about the key lock and it doing it automatically is it gets you that flat 20 to 20 signal to start with, which is what you would normally have out of an aftermarket radio that you typically don't get out of an OE radio.
That's crazy how much the key does. The integration, the auto tune, if you want to call it that. It's crazy that it actually does that. It's crazy. I haven't seen it anywhere else. I haven't, unless I'm just not looking hard enough.
What do you got going on, Robert? I see you thinking.
Oh, I'm just in the chat trying to cut up with him. But I do have a question for Derek. And we're on
Go.
the Kicker Show, and I don't know that I've ever asked him this. Like, Derek, what is your favorite piece of Kicker gear of all time? I put him on the spot.
No, you didn't, because I'm going to steal Mr. Irby's when he was asked that question, because I agree. That is, and maybe it was Kip's too, I can't remember. The round original solo barrack that had the gold letters on it. The very first one of those I heard was a pair of 12s in the back of a little Mitsubishi Eclipse Eagle Talon, whatever it was. It had a Punch 150 amplifier on it. And I could not believe that those were sealed boxes, 12-inch subs. It blew my mind. And it's one of those things that I'm sure since that day there's been something better that has come out. But that system stuck in my mind of just being absolutely incredible. So I would go with the original gold letter solo barracks, which were like 1992 or 93, I think, Kip, something like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back. He was
just a young boy back then, you know.
I was just a sprouting young bass head at that point. But yeah, those would have been it would have been in that 92, 93, 94 era when those came out, because I was selling those at retail.
I mean, who could ever argue against that pick? I mean, those are just so, you'd really have to not know anything about those subs to have an argument against them, because those things are freaking awesome.
They were industry changing for sure. I mean, the whole idea of the solo barrack woofer and how it worked was just, it changed everything.
Bill Frog said some winners have been drawn.
Yeah, it looks like some winners have been drawn. Kip, I don't know when you want to address that, but we'll let you decide. This is your show. We're just here.
Well, we got, like I said, I joke about it all the time, but I really do try to keep it at 90 minutes. I think that's a good run time to, get some stuff going on here and have a decent show. So I'm looking down. We got about 19 minutes left. So we'll burn a few more here, and then we'll call some winners out. I thought this was kind of funny. So you don't think Kip will get the level of attention in a Ford, GM, Yoda, et cetera meeting he gets here? No, probably not.
Yeah. But see, Kip, you have a very unique set of skills. And one of them is being able to talk so much that you can just befuddle them a bit, and you can just keep them in a little bit of dazed thing, and then eventually they're going to agree with you.
Okay, I won't say which manufacturer because it doesn't matter. But I was at a meeting, and it was with an OEM, and it was kind of an open forum session talking about, well, what could we do that would make our products more appealing to you guys to do upgrades and things like that? And I actually vocalized and said in that meeting, it'd be a great idea if you guys would put just a set of RCA jacks on the back of the radios with a full frequency signal so that we could just add whatever we wanted to it without having to deal with the EQ and the DSP that you guys have in there for protecting your speakers. And I think I farted in the room. That's what it felt like.
I would have loved to have the rollback on the tape on that. They just laughed heartily, spit out their coffee and everything else.
Yeah.
They're going to say, who let this guy in again?
Yeah. Is he drunk? Is this man drunk?
It's funny that Nick said that, because I actually did ask those type of questions in a meeting once, and it kind of falls on deaf ears. I mean, the OEs are really focused on just their system. It's closed loop. They want it to work for them. And, companies like us and the others who are in the aftermarket, we have to be on our toes to figure out how to interface into these becoming more complex cars. It's a challenge.
Yeah. I never know any of this new stuff. I just ask Dean. I'll message Dean like, Dean, what do I need if I'm going to do this? And, he's an encyclopedia or something. I'm kind of convinced that Dean might be a robot. Possibly.
All the people out there that works all the time, Dean would definitely be the guy to ask, because he has more on-hands knowledge experience than a lot of people. I mean, he's got more than probably multiple people put together because of not only being an installer and doing what he's doing, but I think he probably retains a lot more of it because he turns around and does his show and actually talks about it. So I think he's a walking encyclopedia when it comes to that interface.
For sure.
I got the best of both worlds, because if I need to know something old school, I ask Derek, because he is an encyclopedia on that end. There's no question about it.
Yeah, Derek, I want to ask you, when did you get into audio, Mr. Old School? I need to know.
19 88.
Damn. That's
So
awesome.
that was my first real experience with my brothers. He had a 1979 RX-7, which, if you know what that is, it's a really small Mazda hatchback, 2 doors, not a lot of room. He had, and people are going to laugh at this because I've told this story many times, he had 2 12s, 2 10s, and 2 8s because you want different frequencies of bass, right?
Highs, lows.
Yeah, for me, it was crazy. It bounced quarters off the top. It was crazy loud. But anyway, that was my experience. Of course, he had all the little dancing lights in the front. He had the drawer loaded Sony half den that would come out. You could put your cassette in. He had the very first CD player that came out by Sony that would skip if you sneezed. But yeah, that was my experience. So I was hooked from then on.
No
And
VU meters?
I'm sorry?
No VU meters?
Well, the spectrum analyzer can work as a VU meter too. So those of us who like dancing lights, we can do either. Right, Kip?
Well, since you said that, yes. I was actually into car audio a little bit before 88. I started into car audio probably about 82, 83. And someone here had a comment. It was kind of funny. So I'll put this one up. My first system just consists of strings attached to a cup and a Tupperware bowl for a sub. So, that's how old I
am. We did discuss you recreating your first system that you took to school with the battery in the pocket.
That needs to be a kicker challenge, I think.
Yeah.
You need to get people to get a backpack, go to the Goodwill or whatever and get a backpack and create one of those systems. And whoever can get the loudest one needs to win something kicker, because that would be fun.
That'd be epic.
The thing about that in today's world, though, back in my time frame, 2 6-volt landing batteries and you were a rock star for 10 minutes. Now today with lithium and other technology in that same space, you're a rock star for hours. It kind of changes the game.
Yeah, but then you have to be concerned about catching on fire too. So it's an added component.
See, I'm going to cheat. I'm totally just getting 2 bullfrogs, syncing them up, paired together, and be like, all right, here we go.
That would rock. There's no doubt.
All right, so before we I want to have a little bit at the end here. So, Bill, I know you've got some winners here. What's funny is I'm probably going to have to look. Doing this from home, I'm used to being at work and printing out the sheet and knowing what we're giving away for prizes. So, JW, why don't you type in, if you know, into the comment section, what our third place winner is going to get tonight? Or I'll have to open up my phone and check email. You probably did send it to me. But Bill, let's announce our third place winner for tonight, if you can, please. I know he's out there. I see him in the feed. There he is. Hey, this is kind of weird. We're all at home. We're miles apart from each other, although Bill is pretty close to me. He lives in the same neighborhood. So winner number 3 is Nick F. in Springville, Alabama. You are our winner tonight. And I'm hoping Jeremy might type into the comment section here. I know you're going to win a Kicker Unmasked Live gray shirt. So we're going to need you to hit us up to get one of those. And then, man, I don't want to misspeak, but I think it's EB300s.
He got it.
Kip, check the private chat, and it's in there too.
Oh, I bet it is. Let me look.
Your boy already got you. I copied and pasted.
Oh, looky there.
Yeah.
Okay, so Nick, you are winning. Like I was right. You're getting an Unmasked Kicker T-shirt. You're getting a set of EB300 earbuds. Those are fantastic products right there. You're going to get a Kicker beanie, and they're even throwing in some koozies. So, man, not that you need a koozie to keep anything cold now, but maybe in a couple weeks. You never know. So that is our third place winner, Nick. If you can, what we need you to do, Nick, is we need you to reach out to social@kicker.com. We need you to provide us with your shipping address. No P.O. box, please. We cannot ship to a P.O. box. It has to be a physical address. We need your shirt size to confirm that. And we do need your phone number for contact. FedEx and UPS are requiring that now. So if on your end they can't get the delivery to you, they've got a phone to get a hold of you and arrange for that to be shipped or delivered at a different time where you to come pick it up. So we do need your phone number for that. So reach out to social@kicker.com. You are our number 3 winner. Bill, who's number 2? Hey, winner, chicken dinner. Peter C. in Union City, New Jersey. Peter, you are winner number 2 in tonight's drawing, and you're getting the same thing as winner number 3. So that means a Kicker Unmasked gray shirt You're going to get those EB300s. You're going to get a kicker beanie, and you're going to get some koozies to go along with that. Again, same thing. I say it over and over only because it doesn't seem like I say it enough. Need you to reach out to social@kicker.com. That'll put you in touch with Bill Frog. Need your shirt size, need your phone number, and we need your mailing address, and it cannot be a P.O. box. And then our first place winner, oh, this is going to be good. Okay, let's announce our first place winner. I see what we got here. Who's our final winner tonight? Our final winner is Scott O. in Cerritos, California. Congratulations, Scott. You are our grand prize winner tonight on Kicker Unmasked Live Weekly. We'll call it the home edition since we're all broadcasting from home studios tonight. You're going to get a BF100 Bullfrog. So, hey, those are fun. Going to get you one of those. You're going to get a kicker beanie and some koozies as well. But then what we're going to hook you up with is you're going to get one of those original black limited edition Kicker Unmasked Live t-shirts. The original run we did on those for the first show, we did them all in black. We've got just a few left, so we're doling those out as special prizes. Either way, the only way you get them to Kicker Unmasked Live t-shirt, you got to tune into the show, guys. That's where we give those away. We're not going to put them up on the website. We're not giving them away any other way. Those Unmasked Live t-shirts are reserved just for participating in the show, and we really hope you guys enjoy it. Give us your information. Thank you to all the winners. Thanks for tuning in. Oh, and a hoodie. JW wanted me to let you know. Oh, and you're getting a hoodie too. So you've got a great grand prize going on there. You're getting the limited edition shirt, the hoodie, but then you're getting that BF100 to go along with it, and the beanie and the koozies. So you're just you're getting a full package right there. You're going to enjoy that. So that's our winners for tonight. Bill, thank you for that hard work. I'm going to go back to the comments feed. Me too, just pronounced congrats. Congrats to everyone. So we got about 9 minutes here. So tell me, Andy, what's going on in the Kicker Club? What's hot?
What's hot in the Kicker Club? We got a lot. We got more members. I mean, we got about 1,700 right now. So we're growing pretty rapid, I'd say, for a new Facebook group. I don't know. I mean, honestly, it's a lot of, builds from even other countries that are coming into the group, which is pretty cool. Kickers, not just USA, it's everywhere. So you do see a lot of that. I mean, otherwise, not too much. It's just really going crazy with me with the Kicker, with the YouTube, with the Mecca, the Team SP Loud. It's hard for me to do everything right now. It's insane, but I'm doing it. So, but yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on here. And Big D, I love your channel, man. This way, there we go. Been following you for a while. Always been watching you and Rob go back and forth. And glad to be on here now. And Rob had me on last week. That was fun. And appreciate you.
Yeah, a big shout out to Andy and Rob for covering for you guys last week. That was pretty awesome. So that's goes without saying.
I feel kind of bad knowing what happened that we didn't reach out to you guys and ask you to do that, but you just did it on your own. And I sure appreciate that. It was nice that you guys took that time slot and did something valuable with it. I sure appreciate that. Go ahead.
I was going to say all the props go to Andy because literally he had about 5 minutes. He was hurrying to finish his dinner so we could get on stream. So all the props go to Andy. I was just fooling around doing nonsense. So.
Hey, couldn't do it without you guys, I'm here to talk about Kicker stuff, Let's keep it going.
Speaking of Kicker stuff, and since we bring up the Kicker Club, I'm obviously a member of that and I follow it. I say this, and I mean this in a genuine way. I think Andy is probably one of the biggest Kicker fans that I've ever seen in my life. I mean, he obviously loves the product and he goes out of his way on social and, during his own personal time to do things and reviews, and he's grown his own YouTube channel. So that's really cool to see that. But there's obviously a lot of interest in L7X. And a lot of those questions get asked in the Kicker Club. All I can tell the people who are left tuned in, which is actually quite a few people still left here, is that that product's coming along. We're hoping to have that in the time frames that we discussed. Was it 2 or 3 shows ago? Time flies when we're having fun. But we're looking for July. Hopefully that happens. Development, shipping, logistics, everything is kind of a nightmare right now in the world. So we're doing our very best to get that out there. But we are as excited to get L7X in your hands as you are to get it. It's going to be fun. I'm sure that we're going to probably when the time comes, we got some of those to sample. I know we'll want to get something to Andy to look at and talk about, and probably demo in his Kicker Club. And of course, I think both Derek and Robert, I think you guys would probably work with you to figure out something for maybe a giveaway or something like that, or have you guys do an unboxing, because that is going to be a pretty interesting product, and there's a lot of excitement for it. And ironically, there's a lot of excitement for the power bars that are coming. There's been a ton of excitement for those mid tweeter pods. And then finally, that little 2 3/4 inch driver. If anybody here has, I wish if we'd been at the studio, I'd have had it as an asset and we could have showed it. But someone I think it was Japan, actually took that 2 3/4, the KS 2 3/4, and the tweeter, and they actually built an A-pillar pod out of it with some fantastic leather work. It's in our Instagram feed, because some people have asked about, a three-way, and obviously you can take a Kicker two-way component system KS and add that into the mix. And if you're going that route, you're going to be building your own passive crossover, going fully active probably, but it makes a fantastic three-way system. So I think we're going to see a lot of questions and people hitting up Kicker wanting to know how to do that going in the future, because those are definitely some products that are getting a lot of interest. So, Andy, I sure appreciate what you do, man, as a prosumer, an enthusiast, and someone who really has had a great experience with the brand and likes what you're doing. I sure appreciate your input on this.
Thank you, Kip. It means a lot, but you know what? It's easy for me. It's easy for me.
Well, I'm glad it's easy for you, because it gets harder for some of us as the days click by.
I imagine so.
Robert, what you got, Dad? You're smiling down there. What you got? You must be reading something funny.
Well, me and Derek got 12 Talk tomorrow. We're going to be doing listener questions the same, and I've got a few topics that we can talk about. So, yeah, that's what we're doing. What do you got, Derek? I'm working on cheap head unit review.
Yeah,
Derek's
I'm excited about that head unit review that Rob's doing. I started a second channel called Willie Williston, and I'm really excited about it because I'm doing stuff that is not fully edited, just kind of off the cuff, and I'm able to do some bike stuff there too. So check that out, Willie Williston on YouTube, in addition to Williston Audio Labs. And again, Kip, thanks for having us. Means a lot, to engage with the community here and have us to talk and have fun with the viewers out there. These guys are great. They always have great questions. They're here every week and hanging out, and it's just a lot of fun. I appreciate you having me join you. I really have a lot of fun doing this.
Well, I got to tell you guys, in all seriousness, I mean, I go back. I don't want to seem starstruck, because I very rarely suffer from that. But if I go back into the time machine, I remember a time when I was reaching out and just trying to talk to old school Big D and Derek Wilson. I remember trying to get a hold of him and wanting to see how we could work and maybe provide products for him to look at or get him on a show. And the first time that you reached back out to me, contact me, it was that starstruck moment. It's like, oh, Big D, it's Big D. He actually responded to my email. And, going from that to actually, been on a few shows with you, and then having you on our show here, and then being able to be pulled into that and meeting, Robert and all the other people through those connections there. And then a guy like Andy comes along. I sincerely mean this when I say it. I enjoy doing this show every Tuesday night. It is, quote unquote, off the clock, and it's, not necessarily 9 to 5, but I don't look at it that way. This is something that I truly enjoy doing. It's fun. It's great interfacing with you guys and all the people who ask questions. And so I have a great time doing this. And I hope that we can continue doing this and having fun. It's the interaction and the feedback, and we want the show to be meaningful to anyone who's a Kicker fan or, wants to learn more about product or anything. That's what we want this show to be about. So if you have questions or topics you'd like to see covered, I'm sincere when I say, man, drop it at social@kicker.com. That gets it right into Bill Frog's hands, and he pulls that information together, and we know what topics would be great to have on a future show. And I don't want to wear you guys out. I mean, I'd love to have you on all the time, but I try to give you guys a break, because you guys are, I'm sincere when I say it, you guys are the rock stars of the 12-volt industry when it comes to the social side, whether it's YouTube or Facebook. You guys are rock stars. And I appreciate you spending your time with us.
Yeah, I would say make sure everybody who's watching as well to go ahead and subscribe to this channel as well. That way you'll get notified when, when Kicker goes live. If you can't remember, every Tuesday, and if they ever do an extra special show, it'll pop into your feed. They're gaining subscribers at a pretty good rate here, but I think this show itself is, it has so much good information, and I'm not just saying it because I'm here, because this is relatively low information with me, but Bobby Gately. You've had a lot of really, really interesting shows that, just to me, I've gained so much knowledge just by watching it. And the fact that you guys are doing this at night, you're doing it kind of off the clock, as you'd say. Obviously, you're growing the community, but you're showing that Kicker is not only a company that tries to sell products, you're a company that cares about the industry as a whole, and you're trying to do things that bring people together, make people want to build bigger systems. And, in the end, it works for you because people spend more money, but we're getting the benefit of getting all this extra information. So my hat's still on. I won't pull it off, but my hat's off to you guys.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I had this up here, Brandon Wallace, giving a shout out to everyone, and that's sincere. I mean, I appreciate each and every one of you joining us here on the Kicker Unmasked weekly live show. This show started just as a kind of a replacement because we couldn't go to SEMA. And, that's a big show where people meet in person. And so we had that one big show, which was very well attended. And we all kicked around, thought it'd be a great idea if we started this weekly show. And so it's going really well. We're having fun. Love the feedback. Love to know what you guys are looking for. And, as long as you guys are willing to keep coming back, love having you guys here, man. It means the world to me to have you guys here and to be able to do something like this. And with us not being able to be in the studio tonight and, do as bigger production, this kind of a from the bedroom, from the bathroom, from the living room feed tonight, it was fun to just kind of look at these questions and answer a little bit more and get deep into that stuff. And I appreciate your time. I mean that sincerely, guys.
Yeah, I appreciate you
did a lot
having us on. And like you say, you do this, Derek said, you're doing this on your free time. Because if I was at my work now, and they said, hey, can you stay over every Tuesday, like 4 to 6 hours and just do a show? We're not going to pay you. We might buy you something to eat. We're going to have a conversation.
Guys.
So you're doing it for love. Everybody's doing it out of love, just like us three do.
It's work, but when we do it, it doesn't feel like work. It's more like being a part of this great community and being able to talk about something we all enjoy and appreciate. And we all learn something. I mean, I love sharing what I know and helping others grow from that. But at the end of the day, I'm not a fool. Every day I wake up, if I pay attention, I learn something new. And I think if you approach it that way, you're always going to be better off.
Exactly.
Yeah. Everybody subscribe to Andy's channel. Let's get him over 1,000. What you doing with your life?
Yeah, Andy, you need to post it in the chat there, because I've had some people ask in the chat room, what's your channel? So post it in there so they can see it.
All right, I will. Yeah, just Andy living loud with Andy. You type that, it's going to be the first thing popping up. Thank you. Yeah, I'll try to leave it down here in the chat. It's hard reading the chat and having a conversation with you guys. I can't multitask. I got to be all in.
You opened up a can of worms there, Big D. That's why Kip does it, for the free food.
Five Guys, oh gosh, man! Don't get me talking about food.
Five Guys will be good about right now.
Yeah, me and Dean talk about food for the first quarter of our show.
That's hilarious. Well, guys, that's right at 90 minutes. I'm doing it every day for the Five Guys. Tonight I did it. My wife cooked for me tonight, so I guess tonight I did it for my wife because I'm actually broadcasting from here at home. I appreciate everyone out there in social land tuning in to Kicker Unmasked Live Weekly tonight. I know it's a little different show because we weren't in the studio, but I appreciate you joining us. I hope you got something good out of it. Hit us with questions, hit us with comments. Love to have them. Until then, I'm going to say good evening to my good friends, Mr. Hi-Fi Vega, Robert, Mr. Derek Wilson, Big D, and Andy McGill over there, living loud with Andy. Guys, thanks for joining us tonight. I'm going to roll the outro, and we're going to call it a show that's in the can. Everyone have a great night. Stay safe, stay warm. Realistically, it's cold all across the U.S., so take care, everyone, and we will see you next Tuesday. Kicker Unmasked Live, 7:30 Central Time, right here on Kicker Facebook and YouTube. And if you haven't noticed, ever since we started it, we actually stream this in conjunction with Andy, so you can actually tune in through Andy's Living Loud with Andy channel. We stream that over there with him as well. So everyone, good night, stay safe, and thank you for joining us. We will see you next week.